Kairo Riven was kneeling in the rain outside his own mansion gate, holding a black umbrella over two tiny kids who weren't crying. And that was the part that broke him. They just sat there, silent, staring at him like they'd already learned that adults don't show up when it matters.
"Daddy's home," Soren shrieked, abandoning his blocks and sprinting toward the three men in tailored suits who shouldn't have been standing in our living room right now. Yeah, so the scariest alpha in Chicago got emotionally bullied by two 4-year-olds in the rain. I'm not even joking. This man runs half the commercial real estate in the Midwest, has lawyers who could dismantle your life before breakfast, and he's out here getting wrecked by twin boys who won't even blink at him. You know that feeling when a kid looks at you and you realize they've already decided you're unreliable? That's what this was. Except these two made that decision before he even opened his mouth. The rain was cold, the kind that soaks through expensive fabric and makes you remember you're human. Kairo's security team was 30 feet back, waiting for orders, but he'd wave them off the second he saw the boys huddled under the oak tree. His driver had spotted them first, two small shapes pressed against the trunk like they were trying to disappear into the bark. No adults nearby, no car, no explanation. Just two kids in identical blue hoodies that were 3 sizes too big, sitting in the mud like they'd been there for hours. Kairo shifted his weight, still crouched. His knee was already soaking through his suit pants. "Where are your parents?" Nothing, not even a flinch. One twin had his arms wrapped around his knees. The other one was staring at Kairo's hand like he was memorizing the veins on the back of it.
"Do you live nearby?" Kairo tried again, softer this time. He wasn't good at soft. Soft wasn't his language. But he was trying, and that alone should have counted for something. The twin on the left, the one with a small scar above his eyebrow, slowly reached into the pocket of his hoodie. His movements were careful, controlled, like he was used to being punished for sudden gestures. He pulled out a small plastic bag, the kind you get from a corner store, and held it out. Inside was a necklace. Kairo's breath stopped. It was a thin silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a crescent moon. The clasp was broken. The silver was tarnished in places, but he knew that necklace. He'd held it in his hands 3 years ago. He'd fastened it around someone's neck and kissed the spot right below her ear while she laughed and told him he was being too sentimental for a man who refused to say, "I love you," out loud. Dahlia Marrow, the Omega who vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no fight, no body, just gone like she'd been erased from the world. Kairo's hand trembled as he reached for the bag. The boy let him take it, still silent, still watching. Kairo turned the necklace over in his palm, checking the small engraving on the back of the pendant. DM plus KR. He'd had it custom made. There were only 2 people in the world who knew about this necklace. Him and Dahlia. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out raw, barely audible over the rain. The twin with the scar didn't speak. He just lifted one small hand and pointed. Not at the street, not at the woods, at the mansion gate behind Kairo. Like the answer was inside his own house. Kairo's chest tightened. His security team was still waiting, silent and alert, but none of them moved. They knew better than to interrupt when Kairo Riven's entire face changed like that. The man who never flinched, who never showed a crack, was staring at 2 kids like they just handed him a grenade with the pin already pulled. He looked down at the necklace again, then back at the twins. They weren't fidgeting. They weren't scared. They were just waiting, like they'd been trained to wait for things that never came. "Who brought you here?" Kairo asked, his voice steadier now, but only barely. The boys didn't answer. The one on the right, the one without the scar, leaned his head against his brother's shoulder and closed his eyes. Exhausted, done, like he'd already used up every ounce of energy he had just to survive the day. Kairo stood slowly, still holding the umbrella over them. Rain pounded against the fabric. His jaw was tight, his mind already moving through a dozen scenarios. None of them good. Someone had left these kids here. Someone who knew where he lived. Someone who knew about Dahlia. And that someone wanted him to find them. "All right," Kairo said quietly, more to himself than to the boys. "Let's get you inside." He gestured to his head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Darius who'd been with him for 10 years. Darius stepped forward, but the moment he got within 5 feet, both twins stiffened. The one with the scar grabbed his brother's arm, and they both pressed back against the tree like they were ready to bolt. Kairo held up a hand. "Stop. I'll take them." Darius frowned but nodded and stepped back. Kairo crouched again, meeting the boys at eye level. "I'm going to pick you up now. Is that okay?" The twins looked at each other. Some silent conversation passed between them, the kind only siblings who'd survived something together could have. Then the one with the scar gave a tiny nod. Kairo slid one arm under the boy's knees and the other around his back, lifting him easily. The kid weighed almost nothing. The second twin stood on shaky legs, and Kairo shifted the umbrella so it covered all 3 of them before scooping him up too. One boy on each arm. They didn't make a sound, didn't cling to him, just went limp, like they'd learned not to expect comfort from being held. Kairo carried them through the gate, past the security cameras, past the perfectly trimmed hedges and the fountain that cost more than most people's houses. The front door opened before he reached it. His housekeeper, Mrs. Ortiz, stood in the doorway with a towel in her hands and a look on her face that Kairo couldn't read. Shock maybe, or recognition. "Get the guest room ready," Kairo said as he stepped inside. "And call Dr. Finch. Tell him it's urgent, but keep it off the record." Mrs. Ortiz nodded, but she didn't move right away. She was staring at the boys, her mouth slightly open, like she was trying to place them. "Mrs. Ortiz," Kairo said sharply. She blinked, snapped out of it, and hurried toward the stairs. Kairo set the boys down gently on the marble floor of the foyer. They stood close together, dripping rainwater onto the expensive tile, looking around the space like they were trying to figure out if they'd been here before. One of them, the one without the scar, tilted his head and stared at the grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. His eyes traced the banister, the chandelier, the family portrait hanging on the far wall. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at Kairo. Not confused, not curious, familiar, like he'd seen it before. Kairo felt something cold settle in his gut. He turned to Darius, who'd followed them inside. "Pull the security footage from the last 6 months. Every gate camera, every hallway, every room. I want to know if anyone's been in this house who wasn't supposed to be here." Darius's expression darkened. "You think someone brought them here before?" "I think someone's playing a game," Kairo said quietly, "and I'm about to find out who." Hi viewers, have you ever had a moment where a stranger handed you something that completely flipped your world upside down? Drop a comment and let me know. The boys were still standing in the foyer, silent and soaked, when Mrs. Ortiz came back down with 2 sets of dry clothes. She knelt in front of them, speaking softly in Spanish, but they didn't respond. She looked up at Kairo, helpless. "They haven't said a word?" she asked. "Not one." Mrs. Ortiz bit her lip, then gently tried to take one of the boys by the hand. The moment her fingers touched his wrist, he flinched, hard. His whole body jerked back, and he pulled his brother with him, both of them retreating toward the wall. Kairo's eyes narrowed. That wasn't just fear. That was conditioning. "Leave the clothes," he said. "I'll handle it." Mrs. Ortiz set the clothes on the floor and backed away, her face pale. Kairo waited until she was gone, then crouched down again, keeping his distance this time. "No one's going to hurt you here, I promise." The twins looked at him, then at each other. Then, slowly, the one with the scar picked up the clothes and handed a set to his brother. They changed right there in the foyer, quick and efficient, like they'd done it 100 times in places that weren't safe enough to relax. When they were done, they stood side by side again, waiting for the next instruction. Kairo exhaled slowly. Whoever had these boys before him had trained them to obey without question. And that made him want to find that person and break every bone in their body. But first, he needed answers. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the stairs. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The boys followed him up the staircase, their bare feet silent on the carpet. Kairo led them to a guest room on the second floor, one with a view of the back garden and a bathroom attached. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting them enter first. They walked in slowly, scanning the room like they were checking for exits. The one without the scar walked straight to the window and looked out at the garden. His brother stayed near the door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Kairo leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Dr. Finch will be here soon. He's gonna check and make sure you're okay. After that, we'll figure out what happens next. Neither of them reacted. Kairo sighed and ran a hand through his damp hair. He had no idea what he was doing. He didn't know how to talk to kids. He didn't know how to comfort them. But he knew how to protect people. And right now, that's what these boys needed. He turned to leave, but a soft sound stopped him. Footsteps. Small, hesitant footsteps. He looked back. The twin with the scar was standing in the middle of the room, holding something out toward him. The necklace. Kairo crossed the room and took it, his throat tight. Thank you. The boy nodded once, then returned to his brother's side. Kairo stood there for a moment, staring down at the necklace in his palm. Then he left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Darius was waiting in the hallway, tablet in hand. I found something, Darius said, his voice tense. You're not going to like it. The security footage was grainy, but it was clear enough.
On the screen, the front gate opened. A black sedan rolled through. No plats. No identification. It parked near the side entrance, and a figure stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat and a baseball cap pulled low. Then two small shapes climbed out of the back seat. The twins. Kairo's jaw tightened. Who authorized that entry? Darius didn't answer right away. He pulled up another file. The gate log says it was approved by Override Code 7. That's my code. I know. Kairo's eyes went cold. I didn't approve that, which means someone used your credentials. Darius zoomed in on the figure's face, but the angle was too high, the cap too low. No clear shot. Whoever this is, they knew how to move through your security system without tripping a single alert.
Kairo watched as the figure led the boys inside through the side entrance. They disappeared into the house. 17 minutes later, they reappeared and got back into the car. The gate closed behind them. Where did they go inside? Kairo asked. Darius pulled up the interior cameras. Hallway, main floor. Then, he paused. The west wing, second floor. Kairo's blood went cold. That's the nursery wing. Yeah, the nursery wing hadn't been used in years. Kairo had renovated it when he and Dahlia were together, back when they were talking about the future in that careful way people do when they're too scared to say the words out loud. Then Dahlia vanished, and Kairo locked the doors and never went back. But someone had taken those boys there. Someone had walked them through those rooms, shown them the space, and then taken them away again. Pull up the nursery footage, Kairo said, his voice low and dangerous. Darius hesitated. Boss, there isn't any. What? There's a 17-minute gap in the footage. Every camera in that wing shut off the moment they entered. When they came back online, the logs were wiped. Kairo turned to face him. That's not a glitch. No, Darius agreed. It's not. Kairo paced to the window, staring out at the garden where the rain had finally stopped. Someone had brought those boys into his home, walked them through a part of his life he'd buried, and then erased the evidence. Whoever did this wasn't just skilled. They were intimate. They knew his systems. They knew his routines. They knew where it would hurt the most. Find out who was in the house that day, Kairo said. Staff, contractors, deliveries. Everyone. Already on it. Darius tapped his tablet. But boss, there's something else. Kairo turned back. I ran a preliminary background check on the boys. No birth certificates. No medical records. No school enrollment. They don't exist in any database. That's impossible. Not if someone wiped them. Darius set the tablet down. These kids were erased, Kairo. Someone went through a lot of effort to make sure they couldn't be traced. Kairo's fists clenched. Whoever did this didn't just abandon the boys. They made sure no one could find out where they came from. which meant they were either covering their tracks or setting a trap. Or both. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Ortiz stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Sir, der Finch is here. And—" She hesitated. "I need to tell you something." Kairo gestured for her to continue. "Those boys," she said quietly. "I've seen them before." The room went still. Kairo's voice was ice. "When?" Mrs. Ortiz swallowed. "For months ago. I was leaving for the day, and I saw them in the hallway upstairs. I thought maybe you'd had visitors. I didn't ask questions." "Why didn't you report it?" "I tried," she said, her voice shaking. "I mentioned it to Mr. Slate the next day. He told me I was mistaken, that you didn't have any visitors that week. He said I must have seen something on the security monitor and gotten confused." Kairo's expression didn't change, but his pulse spiked. "Rowan told you that?" Mrs. Ortiz nodded. Rowan Slate, his beta assistant, the man who'd been by his side for the last 3 years. The man who handled his schedules, his security clearances, his private files. The man Kairo had trusted with everything. "Where is Rowan now?" Kairo asked. Darius checked his tablet. "He took the week off. Said it was personal time. I can pull his location if you—" "Do it." Darius nodded and left the room. Kairo turned back to Mrs. Ortiz. "Thank you. That's all." She hesitated, then left, closing the door behind her. Kairo stood alone in his office, staring at the necklace on his desk. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they were forming was worse than he'd imagined. Someone had taken Dahlia. Someone had kept her hidden. And someone had made sure her children ended up at his gate, holding the one piece of evidence that would break him open. This wasn't random. This was calculated, personal, cruel. And Kairo was going to find out who was behind it if it was the last thing he did. Downstairs, Dr. Finch was waiting in the guest room with the twins. Kairo pushed the door open and found the boys sitting on the edge of the bed, side by side, while the doctor knelt in front of them with a stethoscope. "They're physically healthy," Dr. Finch said without looking up. "A little underweight, some bruising on their arms and legs, but nothing recent. No signs of acute injury." "But," Kairo said, because there was always a but. Dr. Finch stood and pulled Kairo aside, lowering his voice. "Their behavior is consistent with severe psychological trauma. Selective mutism, hypervigilance, avoidance of physical contact. These boys have been through something, Kairo. Something sustained." Kairo looked over at the twins. They were watching him now, their eyes sharp and unreadable. "Can you fix it?" Kairo asked. "It's not about fixing," Dr. Finch said gently. "It's about safety, consistency, trust. These boys need to feel safe before they'll speak again. And that could take months, maybe longer." Kairo nodded slowly. He didn't have months, but he'd make the time anyway. "One more thing," Dr. Finch said. He pulled a small vial from his bag. "I took a DNA sample while I was examining them. Just a cheek swab. I can have the results by tomorrow if you want confirmation." Kairo's throat tightened. "Confirmation of what?" Dr. Finch met his eyes. "Whether or not they're yours." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Kairo didn't respond. He just took the vial, his hand steady even though his heart was racing. "Run it," Kairo said. "Tonight." Dr. Finch nodded and left. Kairo stood there for a long moment, staring at the vial in his hand. Then he looked back at the boys. They were still watching him, still silent, still waiting. And for the first time in 3 years, Kairo Riven allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Dahlia wasn't gone. That night, Kairo sat in the chair outside the guest room, listening to the soft sounds of the boys settling in. He didn't sleep. He just sat there, the necklace in his pocket, waiting for the sun to rise. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Finch. "Results are in. Call me." Kairo stood, walked to the far end of the hallway, and dialed. Dr. Finch answered on the first ring. "Kairo, tell me." There was a pause. Then, "They're yours. Both of them." 99.9% match. Kairo's knees nearly gave out. He braced himself against the wall, his breathing shallow. Kairo? Dr. Finch's voice was gentle. Are you all right? Yeah, Kairo said, even though he wasn't. Yeah, I'm fine. He hung up and stood there in the dark, staring at nothing. He had sons. 2 of them, and he didn't even know their names. Back in the guest room, the twins were asleep. But they weren't quiet. One of them was whimpering, caught in a nightmare. His small body curled tight under the blanket. Kairo pushed the door open and stepped inside. He moved carefully, quietly, until he was standing beside the bed. The boy was shaking. His brother was pressed against him. Awake now, his hand gripping his twin's arm like he was trying to hold him together. Kairo knelt down. Hey, it's okay. You're safe. The boy didn't wake, but he whispered something. One word, soft and broken. Rowan. Kairo's blood turned to ice. He recognized that name. Of course he did. Rowan Slate. His assistant. His confidant. The man who'd been at his side for 3 years. The man who'd just taken the week off without explanation. Kairo stood slowly, his mind already racing. He pulled out his phone and dialed Darius. Find Rowan Slate. Now. The twins didn't eat breakfast. Kairo sat at the head of the dining table, watching as Mrs. Ortiz set down plates of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. The boys sat side by side in chairs that were too big for them, their feet dangling above the floor, staring at the food like it might be a test. Neither of them moved. Mrs. Ortiz hovered nearby, her hands clasped together. Maybe they don't like eggs? Kairo shook his head. It's not the food. He'd seen that look before. Not in children, but in people who'd been kept in places where food came with conditions. Eat when we say. Eat what we give you. Eat only if you've earned it. Kairo pushed his own plate aside and leaned back in his chair, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry. The twin with the scar glanced at him, then at his brother. Then slowly he reached for a piece of toast. His hand was steady, but his eyes kept flicking toward the door, like he was calculating how fast he could run if he needed to. His brother followed his lead, taking a small bite of eggs. They chewed mechanically, joylessly, like eating was just another task to complete. Kairo's chest tightened. These boys had been trained. Not raised. Trained. Darius appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. He gestured for Kairo to step into the hallway. Kairo stood and followed, leaving the boys with Mrs. Ortiz. Tell me you found him, Kairo said the moment they were out of earshot. Darius pulled up his tablet. Rowan's phone is off. His apartment's empty. No credit card activity, no flight records, no hotel bookings. He's off the grid. That's not accidental. No, Darius agreed. It's not. But I did pull up his employment file. There's something you need to see. He handed the tablet to Kairo. On the screen was Rowan's hiring paperwork from 3 years ago. Standard background check. References. Work history. Everything looked clean. Too clean. What am I looking at? Kairo asked. Darius zoomed in on the reference section. Look at the dates. Kairo scanned the document. Rowan's previous employer was listed as a private security firm in Atlanta, but the dates overlapped with another job he'd supposedly had in Seattle. And before that, there was a 6-month gap where Rowan had listed himself as a freelance consultant with no verifiable clients. He lied on his application, Kairo said slowly. More than that. Darius swiped to another screen. I ran his credentials through a deeper database. Rowan Slate isn't his real name. It's an alias. His birth name is Rowan Halliday. And before he worked for you, he worked for a fertility clinic in Indiana. Kairo's pulse spiked. What kind of clinic? Private. Exclusive. Catered to high-net-worth clients who wanted surrogacy arrangements without the legal mess. Darius's voice was tight. The clinic shut down 2 years ago after an ethics investigation. Multiple complaints about coercion, falsified documents, and custody disputes. Kairo's jaw clenched. Did Dahlia ever go there? I'm checking now. But Kairo. Darius hesitated. If Rowan was involved with that clinic and those boys are yours, then he didn't just work for you. He was part of whatever happened to Dahlia from the beginning. Kairo didn't respond. He just turned and walked back into the dining room. The boys were still eating, but the moment Kairo entered, they both froze. The one with the scar set down his toast and wiped his hands on his pants, his shoulders tensing like he was preparing to be scolded. Kairo sat down slowly, keeping his voice calm. "You're not in trouble. I just need to ask you something." The boys didn't move. "Do you remember a man named Rowan?" The reaction was immediate. The twin without the scar flinched so hard he knocked his fork off the table. It clattered to the floor, and both boys went rigid, their eyes wide and locked on Kairo like they were waiting for punishment. Mrs. Ortiz rushed over to pick up the fork, but Kairo held up a hand. "Leave it." She backed away. Kairo leaned forward, his voice soft. "He's not here. You're safe. I promise." The boy who dropped the fork was trembling now, his breathing fast and shallow. His brother grabbed his hand and held it tight, whispering something so quietly Kairo couldn't hear it. But he didn't need to hear it. The fear in their eyes told him everything. Rowan had done something to these boys, something bad enough that just hearing his name made them shut down. Kairo exhaled slowly and stood. "All right, you don't have to talk about it. Not now." He gestured to Mrs. Ortiz. "Take them upstairs. Let them rest." She nodded and gently ushered the boys out of the room. They followed her without protest, but they kept looking back at Kairo, like they weren't sure if he was going to follow them or let them go. Once they were gone, Kairo turned to Darius. "I want everything you can find on Rowan Halliday. Employment records, financial transactions, phone logs, travel history. I want to know every place he's been in the last 5 years. Already on it. And pull Dahlia's medical records. If she went to that clinic, there'll be a paper trail." Darius nodded and left. Kairo stood alone in the dining room, staring at the abandoned plates on the table. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Rowan had been in his house, in his life, in his inner circle, and the whole time he'd been hiding something. Kairo pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer. "Marcus," Kairo said the moment the call connected. "I need a full legal workup on a fertility clinic in Indiana. I'll send you the details. I need to know who owned it, who funded it, and who's liable for what happened there." Marcus, a sharp-voiced attorney who'd worked with Kairo for a decade, didn't ask questions. "How fast do you need it?" "Yesterday. I'll have something by tonight." Kairo hung up and headed upstairs. The guest room door was open. Mrs. Ortiz stood in the hallway, looking pale. "Sir," she said quietly. "You need to see this." Kairo stepped inside. The twins were sitting on the floor near the window, both of them staring at something on the wall. Not the window, the wall. Kairo followed their gaze. There, on the far side of the room, was a family portrait. It had been there for years. Kairo barely looked at it anymore. It showed him his late father and his stepmother Mirena at some gala event, all of them dressed in formal wear, smiling for the camera. The twin with the scar was standing now, his small hand reaching out to touch the frame. His fingers traced the edge of the glass, and then he tapped once on Mirena's face. He looked back at Kairo, then pointed, not at Kairo, at Mirena. Kairo's stomach dropped. "What are you trying to tell me?" Kairo asked, his voice low. The boy didn't answer. He just pointed again, insistent, certain. Mrs. Ortiz's voice was shaking. "Sir, do you think he recognizes her?" Kairo didn't answer. He couldn't. Because if that boy recognized Mirena Riven, it meant she'd been part of this. And if she'd been part of this, then Kairo had been living under the same roof as the person who'd helped destroy his life. He pulled out his phone and texted Darius. "Pull Mirena's financials. Everything. Now." Then he crouched down in front of the boys. "Did she hurt you?" Neither of them moved. "Did she take you somewhere?" Still nothing. Kairo exhaled slowly. He wasn't going to push. Not yet. But he filed the information away, adding it to the growing list of questions that needed answers. He stood and turned to Mrs. Ortiz. Stay with them. Don't let anyone in this room except me or Dr. Finch. Yes, sir. Kairo left the room and walked down the hall to his office. He locked the door behind him, poured himself a drink he didn't want, and sat down at his desk. His phone buzzed. A text from Darius. Found something. Rowan's phone pinged a cell tower 2 hours ago. He's still in the city. Kairo's grip tightened on his glass. Another text came through. And boss, Mirena wired $200,000 to an offshore account 3 months ago. The account is registered to a shell company. I'm tracing it now. Kairo set the glass down and stood. He didn't believe in coincidences. Not when it came to money. Not when it came to missing children. And not when it came to the people he'd trusted. He walked to the window and stared out at the garden, his mind already calculating his next move. Rowan had run. Mirena had paid someone off. And Dahlia's children were sitting upstairs, too traumatized to speak. But they didn't need to speak. They'd already told him everything he needed to know. That night, Kairo stood outside the guest room, listening to the twins sleep, or try to. One of them was crying softly, the kind of quiet, muffled crying that kids do when they've learned that loud crying gets punished. Kairo pushed the door open and stepped inside. The boy with the scar was awake, sitting up in bed, his arms wrapped around his knees. His brother was asleep beside him, curled into a ball. Kairo sat down on the floor near the bed, keeping his distance. Can't sleep. The boy didn't respond, but he looked at Kairo, really looked at him. Kairo held up the necklace. This belonged to someone I cared about. Her name was Dahlia. The boy's eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. Do you know her? Kairo asked. The boy nodded, slowly, once. Kairo's heart stopped. Is she alive? Another nod. Kairo had to close his eyes for a second, just to breathe, just to keep himself from breaking apart right there on the floor. When he opened them again, the boy was still watching him. Where is she? Kairo asked, his voice barely a whisper. The boy pointed at the floor, then made a gesture like he was locking a door. Kairo's blood ran cold. She was being kept somewhere. Locked up. Hidden. Do you know where? The boy shook his head. But then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a small piece of paper. He handed it to Kairo. It was a receipt. Faded. Wrinkled. From a medical supply store in Indiana. Kairo stared at it, his mind racing. Then he looked back at the boy. Thank you. The boy lay back down, his eyes already closing. Kairo stood and left the room, the receipt clenched in his fist. By morning, he'd have an address. And by tomorrow night, he'd have answers. The housekeeper was lying. Kairo knew it the moment Mrs. Ortiz said she'd seen the twins before. Not because she hesitated. Not because she looked away. But because when she said it, the butler, a quiet man named Gregory who'd worked for the Riven family for 15 years, went completely still. Gregory never went still. He was always moving, always adjusting something, always 3 steps ahead of every request. But the second Mrs. Ortiz mentioned seeing the boys months ago, Gregory stopped wiping down the silver tray in his hands and stared at the wall like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Kairo didn't call him out. Not yet, but he filed it away. Now, sitting in his office with Darius across from him and a laptop open between them, Kairo watched the security footage for the 3rd time. The 17-minute gap wasn't just missing. It was surgical. Whoever deleted it knew exactly which cameras to disable, which logs to wipe, and which backup drives to corrupt. That wasn't the work of an outsider. That was someone who'd been in his house long enough to know the system inside and out. Gregory's been with us since I was a kid, Kairo said, his voice flat. My father trusted him. I trusted him. People change, Darius said. Or maybe they were never who you thought they were. Kairo leaned back in his chair, staring at the frozen frame on the screen. The figure in the dark coat was still unidentifiable, but the way they moved was familiar. Confident, deliberate, like they belonged there. Pull Gregory's financials, Kairo said, and his phone records. If he's involved, I want to know who he's been talking to. Darius nodded and made a note. A soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Ortiz stood in the doorway, wringing her hands again. She did that a lot now, ever since the boys arrived. "Sir," she said quietly, "the boys are awake. One of them, he's been standing by the staircase for 10 minutes. Just staring." Kairo stood immediately. He found the twin with the scar at the top of the grand staircase, exactly where Mrs. Ortiz had said. The boy wasn't moving. He was just standing there, one hand on the banister, his eyes locked on something Kairo couldn't see. Kairo approached slowly. "What are you looking at?" The boy didn't turn. He just pointed down the hall. Kairo followed the gesture. The hallway led to the west wing. "To the nursery." "You want to go there?" Kairo asked. The boy nodded. Kairo hesitated. He hadn't been to the nursery in 3 years. He'd locked the doors after Dahlia vanished and told the staff never to go in. It was easier that way. Easier to pretend it didn't exist than to walk past it every day and remember what he'd lost. But the boy was staring at him now, his dark eyes steady and unblinking. "All right," Kairo said. "Let's go." He led the boy down the hall, past the guest rooms and the library, until they reached the double doors at the end. The lock was still in place. Kairo pulled out his key and turned it, the mechanism clicking softly. The door swung open. Inside, the nursery was exactly as he'd left it. 2 cribs with white linen, a rocking chair by the window, shelves lined with books and toys that had never been used. The walls were painted a soft blue, and the curtains were still drawn, casting the room in pale, filtered light. The boy stepped inside slowly, his bare feet silent on the carpet. He walked straight to the far wall, where a mural of a forest had been painted. Trees and animals and a winding river that led to a small cottage. The boy touched the mural, his fingers tracing the outline of the cottage. Then he turned back to Kairo and pointed at the door. Not the door they'd just come through. The door in the mural. Kairo's pulse quickened. What about it? The boy walked to the side of the room and knelt down. He pressed his hand against the baseboard, and something clicked. A hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow compartment built into the wall. Kairo's breath stopped. Inside the compartment was a small leather journal, a stack of photographs, and a sealed envelope with his name, written on the front in handwriting he recognized. Dahlia's handwriting. Kairo knelt beside the boy and pulled the items out, his hands shaking. The journal was worn, the edges frayed. The photographs were recent. One showed Dahlia smiling at the camera, holding 2 infants in her arms. Another showed the twins as toddlers, standing in a garden somewhere Kairo didn't recognize. The envelope was heavy. He turned it over, broke the seal, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Kairo, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. And if you're reading this, it means someone brought our boys to you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to protect them. I tried to protect you. But I didn't know how deep this went. Rowan isn't who you think he is. He's been watching you for years, studying you. He wants to be you. And when he realized he couldn't, he decided to take everything that made you human and destroy it. He took me. He took our children. And he'll keep taking until you stop him. The clinic in Indiana is just the beginning. There's a network. Judges, lawyers, doctors. They're all connected. And Mirena is funding it. I'm so tired, Kairo. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. And I never stopped fighting. Find them. Find our boys. And don't let them grow up thinking they weren't wanted. D. Kairo's vision blurred. He read the letter again. Then again. His throat was tight, his chest aching. Dahlia had been alive. She'd been fighting. And she'd left him a trail. He looked at the boy, who was watching him with those same dark, knowing eyes. You knew this was here, Kairo said quietly. The boy nodded. Did she tell you where to find it? Another nod. Kairo exhaled slowly and stood, the letter still in his hand. He turned to find Darius standing in the doorway, his face pale. How long have you been there? Kairo asked. Long enough. Darius stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the hidden compartment. Kairo, if Mirena's involved, She is, Kairo said, cutting him off. And we're going to prove it. He handed Darius the photographs. Run these through facial recognition. I want to know where they were taken. And I want to know who else is in them. Darius took the photos and nodded. What about the journal? Kairo looked down at the worn leather cover. He didn't want to open it. Not here. Not now. But he knew he had to. I'll read it tonight, Kairo said. After the boys are asleep. He knelt down in front of the boy and met his eyes. Thank you for showing me this. The boy nodded once. Then he took Kairo's hand and squeezed it. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact. And Kairo felt something crack open inside his chest. Come on, Kairo said, his voice rough. Let's get you back to your brother. That evening, after the twins were fed and settled in their room, Kairo sat alone in his office with the journal open in front of him. Dahlia's handwriting covered the pages. Some entries were short, just a few lines. Others were long, detailed accounts of what had happened to her. Day 1. They told me I was sick, that I needed help. I told them I was fine. They didn't listen. Day 8. They took my phone, my wallet, my ID. They said it was for my own safety. Day 15. I asked to see Kairo. They said he didn't want to see me. I know that's a lie, but I can't prove it. Day 23. The doctor gave me something. I don't know what it was. I couldn't think straight for 3 days. Day 30. I realized I was pregnant. I didn't tell them. Couldn't. They'd take the babies away. Kairo's hands were shaking. He kept reading. Day 87. They moved me to a new facility. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere no one would think to look. Day 120. I gave birth. 2 boys. They're perfect. They're everything. But they won't let me keep them. Day 121. Rowan came to see me. He said Kairo had moved on. That he didn't want children. That he didn't want me. I don't believe him. But what if I'm wrong? Kairo had to stop. He set the journal down and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe through the rage and grief that were threatening to drown him. Rowan had lied to her, manipulated her, made her believe she'd been abandoned. And Kairo had been living his life, completely unaware, while Dahlia suffered. He picked up the journal again and kept reading. Day 200. The boys are growing so fast. I wish you could see them. I wish I could tell you about them. But Rowan says if I try to contact you, they'll take them away permanently. Day 250. I'm starting to lose hope, but I can't give up. Not yet. Not while they're still alive. Day 300. I hid the necklace. The one you gave me. I'm going to give it to them when they're old enough. So they'll know I love them. So they'll know you existed. The journal ended abruptly after that. The last entry was dated 2 weeks ago. I'm running out of time, but I left clues. If you're reading this, you've already found one. Keep looking, Kairo. Don't stop. Kairo closed the journal and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. Dahlia was still alive, somewhere, and he was going to find her. His phone buzzed. A text from Darius. Photos analyzed. Location identified. Indiana. Small town called Greenfield. 30 minutes outside Indianapolis. Kairo stood and grabbed his coat. He was going to Indiana. Tonight. But first, he had one more person to confront. Kairo found Mirena in the sitting room, sipping tea and reading a book like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked up when he entered, her expression calm. Kairo, you're up late. We need to talk, Kairo said, his voice cold. Mirena set down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap. About what? About the twins. About Dahlia. About the $200,000 you wired to an offshore account 3 months ago. Mirena's smile didn't falter. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Kairo stepped closer. And you're going to tell me everything. Or I'm going to make sure you never see the outside of a courtroom again. Mirena's eyes glittered. You always were dramatic, Kairo. Try me. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress. Those boys are adorable. Really. But you should be careful who you let near them. Kairo's jaw clenched. What does that mean? Mirena smiled. It means you're not as smart as you think you are. She walked past him toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Kairo? If you go to Indiana, you'll regret it. Kairo turned. Is that a threat? No, Mirena said, her smile widening. It's a promise. The DNA results came back at 6 a.m. Kairo had been awake all night, sitting in his office with Dahlia's journal open in front of him, reading the same entries over and over until the words blurred together. He'd memorized the dates, the details, the names she'd mentioned. But none of it brought him closer to finding her. Then his phone buzzed, and Dr. Finch's name appeared on the screen. Kairo answered on the first ring. Tell me. They're yours, Dr. Finch said. Both of them. Biological match. No doubt. Kairo exhaled slowly. He'd known, of course. From the moment the boy handed him the necklace, he'd known. But hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that punched through the numbness he'd been carrying since Dahlia disappeared. What about their medical history? Kairo asked. Clean as far as I can tell. But Kairo, Dr. Finch hesitated. There's something else. Kairo's grip on the phone tightened. What? Their muteness isn't organic. It's psychological. Trauma-induced selective mutism. These boys didn't lose their ability to speak. They chose to stop. Or more accurately, they were conditioned to stop. Conditioned how? Punishment, Dr. Finch said quietly. Repeated, consistent punishment for speaking. Could have been verbal. Could have been physical. Either way, their brains associated speaking with danger. So they stopped. Kairo's vision blurred for a second. He had to grip the edge of his desk to keep himself steady. Can it be reversed? With time and therapy, yes. But it's not about forcing them to speak. It's about making them feel safe enough to want to. And that could take months. Maybe years. Kairo nodded even though Dr. Finch couldn't see him. Thank you. Kairo, dear. Finch said, his voice softer now. Whoever did this to them, they weren't just cruel. They were systematic. This wasn't random abuse. This was calculated. Kairo ended the call and sat in silence, staring at the journal on his desk. Calculated. That was the word that kept coming back to him. Everything about this, the timing, the necklace, the hidden journal, the boys being left at his gate, was deliberate. Someone had orchestrated this entire thing, and Kairo was starting to realize it wasn't just Rowan. It was bigger, more organized, and it had been happening right under his nose for years. A soft knock pulled him out of his thoughts. Darius stepped inside, holding a tablet. We've got movement. Kairo stood. Where? Gregory. He just withdrew $10,000 in cash from an ATM downtown. And his phone pinged a location 2 blocks from Rowan's last known address. Kairo's expression went cold. Get the car. 20 minutes later, Kairo and Darius were parked outside a rundown apartment building on the south side of Chicago. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions and security cameras conveniently stopped working. Darius checked his tablet. Gregory's phone is still inside. 3rd floor, Unit 312. Kairo didn't wait. He got out of the car, crossed the street, and entered the building without breaking stride. The stairwell smelled like mold and old cigarettes. The lights flickered. Somewhere above him, a baby was crying. He reached the 3rd floor and found Unit 312 at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. Kairo pushed it open. Inside, the apartment was bare. No furniture, no decorations. Just a folding chair, a table, and a laptop sitting open with the screen still glowing. Gregory was sitting in the chair, his back to the door. He didn't turn around. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Kairo stepped inside, his footsteps slow and deliberate. How long have you been working for Rowan? Gregory finally turned. He looked older than Kairo remembered. Tired. Worn down. Since the beginning. The beginning of what? Since Rowan decided you didn't deserve her. Gregory's voice was flat, emotionless. He tried to be you, for years. Studied the way you talked, the way you walked, the way you handled people. But no matter how hard he tried, he wasn't you. And when Dahlia chose you over him, something broke. Kairo's jaw tightened. Rowan never even met Dahlia before she disappeared. That's what you think. Gregory stood, his hands in his pockets. He met her 2 years before you did. At a non-profit gala. She turned him down. Didn't even remember his name the next time they ran into each other. That's what started it. The obsession. Kairo's fists clenched. So he decided to destroy her. He decided to erase her, Gregory corrected. So you'd never have a reason to choose her over him. But then she got pregnant. And that complicated things. Where is she? Kairo's voice was low, dangerous. Gregory tilted his head. You really think I'm going to tell you? Kairo took a step forward. You're going to tell me everything. Or I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell so small you'll forget what daylight looks like. Gregory smiled. It was a cold, empty smile. You always were good at threats, Kairo. But threats don't work on people who've already lost everything. Then what do you want? Nothing, Gregory said. I just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized you were too late. Kairo moved before Gregory could react. He grabbed the older man by the collar, slammed him against the wall, and held him there, his forearm pressed against Gregory's throat. Where is she? Gregory didn't flinch. He just smiled wider. You'll never find her in time. Kairo's grip tightened. Try me. Darius appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn. Kairo stepped back. Kairo didn't move. Kairo, Darius said again, firmer this time. Let him go. We need him alive. Kairo released Gregory, who slumped against the wall, gasping for air. Darius moved forward, cuffing Gregory's hands behind his back. You're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and about a dozen other charges I'm going to make up on the way to the station. Gregory laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. You think arresting me is going to change anything? Rowan's already 3 steps ahead of you. He always has been. Kairo knelt down so he was at eye level with Gregory. Then I'll take 4. He stood and walked out of the apartment, pulling out his phone as he went. Marcus, Kairo said when his lawyer answered. I need a warrant. Now. And I need immunity for anyone who cooperates. I don't care what it takes. Get it done. He ended the call and turned to Darius. Take Gregory to a private location. Not the police station. Somewhere we control. Darius nodded. What are you going to do? I'm going to Indiana, Kairo said. And I'm going to end this. Back at the mansion, Kairo found the twins sitting on the floor of their room, playing with a set of wooden blocks Mrs. Ortiz had given them. They weren't building anything, just stacking them, knocking them down, stacking them again. When Kairo entered, both boys looked up. The one with the scar stood and walked over to him, holding out a small piece of paper. Kairo took it. It was a drawing, crude, done in crayon, but clear enough. A woman in a room with no windows, bars on the door, a man standing outside. Is this where she is? Kairo asked quietly. The boy nodded. And this man? Kairo pointed at the figure outside the door. Is this Rowan? Another nod. Kairo folded the drawing carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he knelt down so he was at the boy's level. I'm going to find her. I promise. The boy stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something Kairo didn't expect. He leaned forward and wrapped his small arms around Kairo's neck. Kairo froze. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't good at this. He didn't know how to be soft, how to be comforting. But the boy was holding on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting, so Kairo did the only thing he could think of. He held him back. I'm going to bring her home, Kairo said quietly. I promise. The boy didn't let go for a long time. That night, as Kairo packed a bag for Indiana, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. If you want Dahlia, trade the twins. Kairo stared at the message, his pulse spiking. Another text came through. You have 48 hours. Kairo didn't respond. He just grabbed his bag, walked out of his room, and headed for the garage. Darius was waiting by the car, arms crossed. You're not going alone. Yes, I am. No, Darius said firmly. You're not. Because if you go in there alone and something happens to you, those boys lose both of you. So I'm coming. And you're not arguing. Kairo stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. They got in the car and drove into the night, the city lights fading behind them as they headed toward Indiana, toward Dahlia, toward the man who'd taken everything from him, and toward the truth that was about to tear his entire world apart. Rowan was sitting in a cafe in Greenfield, Indiana, drinking coffee like he hadn't just destroyed 3 lives. When Kairo walked through the door, he didn't run, didn't flinch, just looked up, smiled, and gestured to the empty chair across from him. I was wondering how long it would take you. Kairo didn't sit. He stood there, staring at the man who'd been his right hand for 3 years, and felt nothing but ice in his veins. Darius was positioned by the door, blocking the exit. 2 other members of Kairo's security team were outside, making sure Rowan had nowhere to go. The cafe was small, one of those places that smelled like burnt coffee and old pastries. A few customers sat scattered at tables, oblivious to what was about to unfold. The barista behind the counter was wiping down the espresso machine, humming along to whatever song was playing through the tinny speakers overhead. Where is she? Kairo asked. Rowan took another sip of his coffee, taking his time like they had all day. You know, I always admired you. The way you moved through the world like nothing could touch you, like you were untouchable. I wanted that. I tried to learn it, studied you for years. The way you talked in meetings, the way you handled pressure, even the way you drank your coffee. He gestured to his cup. Black, 2 sugars, just like you. I'm not here for your therapy session, Kairo said, his voice cold. I'm here for Dahlia. Rowan's smile widened, but there was nothing warm about it. It was the smile of someone who'd already won and was just waiting for everyone else to realize it. She's alive. For now. Kairo's fists clenched at his sides. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, ready to strike. But he forced himself to stay still, to stay in control, because losing control was exactly what Rowan wanted. What does that mean? It means you have a choice to make. Rowan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, almost bored. You can have Dahlia, or you can have those boys. But you can't have both. The cafe went quiet. Even the barista behind the counter had stopped moving, her hand frozen on the espresso machine. The other customers were staring now, sensing the tension that had filled the room like smoke. Kairo took a step closer. That's not a choice. That's a threat. No, Rowan said, his voice soft but firm. It's a negotiation. You give me the twins. I give you Dahlia. Simple. Why the twins? Rowan's smile widened, and for the first time, Kairo saw something ugly behind it, something that had been hiding there all along. Because they're the only thing that proves what I did. Without them, there's no DNA evidence. No witnesses. No case. The clinic records are gone. The adoption papers were never filed. The birth certificates don't exist. And you know as well as I do that the system protects people like me. People who know how to work it. Kairo stared at him, his jaw tight. You really think I'm going to hand over my sons to save their mother? I think you'll do whatever it takes to get her back, Rowan said. Because that's who you are. You're a fixer. You solve problems. And right now, Dahlia is your biggest problem. She's been locked up for 3 years. Drugged. Told she's crazy. Told you abandoned her. How much longer do you think she can hold on? Kairo's chest tightened. The image of Dahlia, alone and broken, flashed through his mind. But then he thought of the twins, Zion and Elijah, his sons. 2 little boys who'd already survived more than any child should have to. You're wrong, Kairo said quietly. Am I? Rowan tilted his head, studying him. Because from where I'm sitting, you've already lost. You just haven't admitted it yet. Kairo moved fast. He grabbed Rowan by the collar, lifted him out of the chair, and slammed him against the wall. The cafe erupted in noise. Someone screamed. The barista reached for her phone, her hands shaking. Darius stepped forward. Kairo, not here. Kairo didn't let go. He leaned in close, his voice low and deadly. You're going to tell me where she is, and then you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cage so small you'll forget what freedom feels like. Rowan laughed. It was a broken, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. You still don't get it. I didn't do this alone. There's a whole network behind me. Judges, lawyers, doctors, even your precious Mirena. You take me down and they'll bury you. They'll make you look like the unstable one, the dangerous alpha who couldn't control his emotions, who assaulted people in public. He gestured around the cafe. Look around. There are witnesses. Kairo's grip tightened. Then I'll bury them first. Rowan's smile faded. For the first time, something like fear flickered in his eyes. You can't. Because the second you go after them, Dahlia dies. That's the deal. That's how this works. There are people watching her right now. People who will get a call if I don't check in every 12 hours. And if I don't check in, she's gone. Overdose. Suicide. Whatever story they decide to tell. Kairo released him and stepped back, his chest heaving. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage so pure and hot it felt like it was burning him from the inside out. Where is she? Kairo asked again. Rowan straightened his shirt, still smiling even though his hands were trembling. There's a facility 20 miles outside of town. Private. Off the books. Used to be a rehab center, but it closed down 5 years ago. Now it's used for other things. She's in the East Wing. Room 14. But if you show up without the twins, she's gone before you get through the door. I'll make the call myself. Kairo turned and walked toward the exit. Darius followed. Kairo, Rowan called out, his voice echoing through the cafe. You're running out of time. You've got maybe 6 hours before my next check-in. After that, it's out of my hands. Kairo didn't look back. He pushed through the door and stepped into the cold afternoon air. His mind was racing, calculating every possible move. Outside, Darius grabbed his arm. You're not seriously considering this. I'm not giving him anything, Kairo said. But I need to know where she is. And now I do. What about the twins? If he's telling the truth. He is, Kairo said. That's the problem. He's telling the truth about everything. The network, the system, the people protecting him. But he made one mistake. What's that? He told me where Dahlia is. Kairo pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus. I need a federal warrant. Now, I don't care what it takes. I don't care who you have to wake up or what favors you have to call in. Get it done in the next 2 hours. Marcus's voice was sharp on the other end. Kairo, you know warrants don't work that. Make it work, Kairo said. Or I'm going in without one. There was a pause. Then Marcus sighed. I'll see what I can do. But if this goes wrong, if you breach that facility without proper authorization, then I'll deal with the consequences, Kairo said. Just get me the warrant. He ended the call and looked at Darius. We're going to that facility, with or without the warrant. And if he's telling the truth? If they kill her the second we show up? Kairo's expression went dark. Then I'll make sure every single person involved regrets it for the rest of their very short lives. They got in the car and drove. The facility was hidden behind a stretch of farmland, surrounded by high fences and security cameras. It looked like a private hospital from the outside. Clean, professional, freshly painted. But Kairo knew better. Places like this didn't exist on maps. They existed in the gaps where the law didn't reach, where money and power could make people disappear. Darius parked half a mile away, and they approached on foot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. The air smelled like rain and turned earth. Kairo's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Warrant approved. Sending backup. ETA 30 minutes. Kairo didn't have 30 minutes. He had Dahlia's face burned into his memory and 2 boys back home who were counting on him to bring their mother back. He had a promise to keep. And Kairo Riven didn't break promises. He climbed the fence, the chain link rattling under his weight. Darius was right behind him, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. They moved quickly, staying low, avoiding the camera angles Darius had mapped out on his tablet during the drive. The east wing was at the back of the building, away from the main entrance. Kairo's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He'd faced down corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, and threats from people who could buy small countries. But none of that compared to the fear he felt now. The fear that he'd be too late, that Dahlia would be gone before he could reach her. Room 14. Kairo reached the window first. The glass was reinforced, but he could see through it. A small room, maybe 10 by 10. A bed pushed against one wall. A single chair. And a woman sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to the window. Dahlia. Kairo's breath caught in his throat. She looked thinner than he remembered. Her hair was longer, hanging down her back in tangled waves. She was wearing a gray hospital gown, her feet bare against the cold tile floor. But she was alive. She was breathing. She was real. He tapped on the glass softly. She didn't turn. He tapped again, harder this time, using his knuckles to make a sharper sound. She stood slowly, like her body didn't quite remember how to move. She walked to the window with hesitant steps. When she saw him, her face went blank. Not shocked, not relieved, just blank, like she was looking at a stranger. Kairo's chest tightened. He pressed his hand against the glass. Dahlia, it's me. She stared at him, her eyes empty. Then she shook her head slowly, like she was trying to shake off a dream she didn't want to wake from. Dahlia, Kairo said again, his voice breaking. It's Kairo. I'm here. I'm getting you out. She turned away and sat back down on the bed, her shoulders hunched. Kairo felt something crack inside him. He looked at Darius. Break the window. Kairo, if we break it. Darius pulled out a compact tool designed for breaking tempered glass. He pressed it against the corner of the window and twisted. The glass shattered instantly, falling inward in a cascade of tiny pieces. Alarms started blaring immediately, their shrill sound cutting through the quiet evening. Kairo climbed through, ignoring the sharp edges that caught at his jacket. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of Dahlia. Up close, she looked even more fragile. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her hands were shaking. It's me, he said softly. It's Kairo. I came for you. She looked at him, really looked at him. And then, slowly, tears started streaming down her face. I don't know you, she whispered. Kairo's heart stopped. They told me you didn't want me, she said, her voice shaking. They told me I made you up, that I was sick, that I was broken, that I imagined everything. The necklace, the apartment, the nights we spent talking until sunrise. They said none of it was real. You're not broken, Kairo said, his voice rough with emotion. And I never stopped looking for you. Not for a single day. I searched everywhere. I hired investigators. I went to the police. I did everything I could think of. And when that wasn't enough, I kept searching anyway. She stared at him, searching his face like she was trying to find something she'd lost. Her hand reached out slowly, trembling, and touched his cheek. Her fingers were cold against his skin. Kairo, she whispered. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Her whole body shook with the force of it. 3 years of pain and fear and loneliness pouring out all at once. Kairo held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. He held her like he'd never let go again. Darius appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. We've got company. 3 guards heading this way. We need to move. Now. Kairo stood, pulling Dahlia with him. She was weak, unsteady on her feet, but she held on to him like he was the only thing keeping her upright. Like if she let go, she'd fall and never get back up. They made it to the hallway before the guards appeared. 3 of them, all wearing security uniforms, all armed with tasers. They blocked the exit, spreading out to cover the width of the corridor. Kairo pushed Dahlia behind him. Get out of the way. The lead guard, a stocky man with a shaved head, raised his taser. Step back. Now. This is private property. You're trespassing. Kairo didn't move. You're going to let us walk out of here, or I'm going to make sure every single one of you ends up in federal prison for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and about 20 other charges I'm going to have my lawyers dream up. The guard hesitated. His eyes flicked to his partners, then back to Kairo. Sir, I'm just doing my job. Your job is illegal, Kairo said. And in about 5 minutes, this place is going to be swarming with federal agents. So you have a choice. Let us go and maybe you walk away from this. Or stop us, and I guarantee you'll be the first one they arrest. The sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows at the end of the hall. Marcus had sent backup. Right on time. The guards looked at each other. The lead guard slowly lowered his taser. Go! Kairo took Dahlia's hand and walked past them, Darius covering their exit with his hand on his weapon. They made it outside just as the federal agents stormed the building, their voices echoing through the halls. Dahlia was shaking, her legs barely holding her up. Kairo scooped her into his arms and carried her to the car. She didn't protest. She just wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. You're safe now, he said quietly. I've got you. She didn't respond. She just closed her eyes and let herself believe it. As they drove away from the facility, Kairo's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have made the trade. Kairo stared at the message, his pulse spiking. Then another text came through. Now you'll lose everything. Kairo's blood turned to ice. He dialed his house immediately. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Mrs. Ortiz answered, her voice high and panicked. Sir, I'm so sorry. I only looked away for a second. What happened? Kairo demanded. The boys, she sobbed. They're gone. The twins were gone. Kairo pulled over to the side of the road so fast the tires screamed against the asphalt. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. Dahlia was awake now in the back seat, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. What's happening? She asked. Kairo couldn't answer. He couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed to a single point of absolute terror. Mrs. Ortiz, Kairo said, forcing his voice to stay level. Tell me exactly what happened. I was in the kitchen, Mrs. Ortiz said through her tears, making them lunch. They were in the living room playing with those blocks you got them. I heard the doorbell ring. When I went to check, there was no one there. But when I came back, her voice broke. They were gone. Just gone. The back door was open. The security footage is blank. Just like before. Kairo's vision blurred. He wanted to punch something, wanted to scream, but he forced himself to think, to focus, call the police, file a report, then call Darius's team and have them lock down the house. No one comes in or out. Yes, sir, Mrs. Ortiz whispered. Kairo ended the call and immediately dialed Darius, who was in the car behind them. The boys are gone. There was a pause. Then Darius's voice came through, calm and controlled. When? Less than an hour ago. Rowan must have had someone waiting. Watching. I'm on it, Darius said. I'll get Marcus to issue an Amber Alert. And I'll have every camera in a 5-mile radius pulled and reviewed. Do it fast, Kairo said. Because if anything happens to them, it won't, Darius said firmly. We'll find them. Kairo ended the call and sat there, staring at nothing. Dahlia climbed into the front seat, moving slowly, carefully. She put her hand on his arm. The boys? She asked quietly. Kairo nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Our boys? Her voice cracked on the word. Yes. Dahlia's face crumpled. I haven't even met them yet. I haven't even held them. Kairo pulled her into his arms. We're going to find them. I promise. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. The clinic. Where it all started. You have 2 hours. Kairo stared at the message. Then he started the car and turned it around, heading back toward Indiana. Where are we going? Dahlia asked. To get our sons. The drive back to the clinic took 45 minutes. Kairo pushed the car as fast as it would go, weaving through traffic, running red lights when he had to. Dahlia sat beside him, silent and pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When they arrived, the federal agents were gone. The building stood dark and empty. The broken window Kairo had shattered still gaping open like a wound. Kairo got out of the car. Darius pulled up beside him moments later, along with 2 other security vehicles. "The feds cleared out an hour ago," Darius said. "They arrested the guards and the facility administrator. But the building's empty now." "It's not empty," Kairo said. "He's in there, with the boys." They approached the building carefully. The front door was unlocked this time. Kairo pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell of disinfectant and decay hit him immediately. "Zion! Elijah!" Kairo called out. His voice echoed through the empty halls. No response. Darius checked his tablet. No heat signatures on the main floor, but there's something in the basement. 2 small sources, and 1 larger one. Kairo didn't wait. He ran toward the stairwell at the back of the building, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Dahlia and Darius followed close behind. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a heavy metal door with a keypad lock. The same kind of lock that had been on Dahlia's room. Darius pulled out his bypass device and went to work. 30 seconds felt like 30 hours. Finally, the lock clicked open. Kairo pushed the door open and stepped inside. The twins were there, sitting on the floor in the corner, back to back, their small bodies pressed together for warmth. They weren't crying. They weren't making any sound at all. They just sat there, silent and terrified, exactly the way they'd been trained to be. Rowan was standing across the room, his back against the wall. He looked different than he had in the cafe. Disheveled, desperate. His shirt was untucked, his hair messy. There was a wild look in his eyes that Kairo had never seen before. "You came," Rowan said. "I knew you would." Kairo crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed Rowan by the throat and slammed him against the wall so hard the concrete cracked. "You're done." Rowan smiled. Even with Kairo's hand crushing his windpipe, he smiled. "You think this is over? You think arresting me changes anything? I'm not the only one. There are dozens like me. Hundreds. People who've been doing this for decades. And they're all going to keep doing what they've been doing because the system protects them. Because people like you are too busy fighting fires to see the whole forest burning." Kairo's grip tightened. "Then I'll burn the system down." "You can't," Rowan wheezed. "It's bigger than you. Bigger than all of us." Kairo released him and let him drop to the floor. Rowan crumpled, gasping for air, coughing. Kairo turned to the twins. They looked up at him, their eyes wide and filled with something he couldn't name. Fear, hope, recognition, maybe all 3. "It's over," Kairo said softly, kneeling down in front of them. "You're safe now, I promise." The twin with the scar, Zion, stood slowly. He walked over to Kairo on shaky legs. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around Kairo's neck and held on. Elijah followed, pressing himself against Kairo's side. Kairo pulled both boys into his arms, holding them as tightly as he dared. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let this happen." Behind him, Dahlia had sunk to her knees. She was staring at the boys, tears streaming down her face. "Can I?" she started, then stopped. "Can I hold them?" Kairo looked at the twins. "Boys, this is your mother. Her name is Dahlia." Zion and Elijah turned to look at her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Elijah walked over to Dahlia slowly. He reached out and touched her face, like he was making sure she was real. Dahlia let out a sob and pulled him into her arms. Zion followed, and suddenly all 3 of them were on the floor, holding each other, crying. Kairo stood and turned back to Rowan. Darius had already pulled out handcuffs and was securing him. "The feds will be here in 10 minutes, Darius said. "What do you want to do with him?" "Let them take him," Kairo said. "But I want full federal charges. Kidnapping, conspiracy, human trafficking, everything." "Already on it," Darius said. Rowan laughed from his position on the floor. "You still don't get it. The charges won't stick. My lawyers will have me out in 48 hours. And then we'll do this all over again. Kairo crouched down so he was at eye level with Rowan. That's where you're wrong. Because I'm not just pressing criminal charges. I'm going after everyone in your network. Every judge, every lawyer, every doctor, every person who helped you. And I'm going to use every dollar I have, every connection I've made, every favor I'm owed to make sure none of you ever hurt another family again. Rowan's smile faltered. You wanted to be me? Kairo continued. You wanted my life? My power? Here's what you didn't understand. Power isn't about control. It's about accountability. And I'm about to hold every single person in your network accountable. He stood and walked back to Dahlia and the boys. The federal agents arrived minutes later, swarming the building. They took Rowan into custody, reading him his rights as they led him away in handcuffs. Kairo didn't watch him go. He was too busy holding his family. Let's go home, he said quietly. Dahlia nodded, still holding the twins. Home. They walked out of the clinic together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It should have felt like an ending, like victory, but Kairo knew better. The fight was just beginning, because Rowan was right about one thing. The system that had protected him was still out there, still operating, still hurting people, and Kairo was going to tear it down, piece by piece, person by person, whatever it took. The evidence hit the news cycle like a bomb. Kairo had spent 3 days preparing the release, working with Marcus and a team of investigative journalists to make sure every document, every recording, every piece of evidence was verified and airtight. He didn't want to give anyone room to claim it was fabricated or exaggerated. The fertility clinic in Indiana, the falsified adoption papers, the network of lawyers and judges who'd helped facilitate it all. The shell companies used to launder money, the offshore accounts, the names, especially the names. When the story broke, it dominated every news channel. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. People demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded accountability. And at the center of it all was Mirena Riven. The courtroom was silent when Kairo entered for the preliminary hearing. The gallery was packed with reporters, cameras, and spectators. Mirena sat in the front row with her defense team, perfectly composed as always. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. Her suit was immaculate. She looked like she was attending a charity gala, not a criminal proceeding. But Kairo could see the cracks, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were clasped too tightly in her lap. The prosecutor stood and began his opening statement. Your Honor, the evidence we're about to present shows a systematic conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud, and human trafficking. Mrs. Mirena Riven funded a private fertility clinic that was operating outside the bounds of legal adoption procedures. She wired $200,000 to an offshore account tied directly to Rowan Slate, the clinic's primary operator. And she did so knowing the clinic was being used to separate children from their biological parents and place them with clients who paid substantial fees. Mirena's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Catherine Brenner, stood immediately. Objection. My client had no knowledge of any illegal activities. The money she transferred was for legitimate medical research. Your client signed the transfer documents herself? The prosecutor said, holding up a stack of papers. And we have testimony from 3 witnesses who confirm she was aware of the clinic's operations, including testimony from Mr. Rowan Slate himself, who has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. Kairo sat in the front row, watching as Mirena's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. She leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, her expression tight. The prosecutor continued. We also have bank records showing that Mrs. Riven received monthly payments from the clinic. Payments totaling over $1.5 million over the course of 3 years. These payments were disguised as consulting fees, but our forensic accountants have determined they were profit-sharing from the clinic's illegal adoption operations. Catherine Brenner stood again. Your Honor, this is speculation. There's no direct evidence linking my client to. We have emails, the prosecutor interrupted. He pulled up a projection on the screen at the front of the courtroom. This email, dated 18 months ago, is from Rowan Slate to Mirena Riven. It reads, and I quote, "The latest placement went smoothly. The clients were satisfied. Your share has been deposited into the usual account." Mrs. Riven responded, "Excellent. Keep me updated on future opportunities." The courtroom went completely silent. Mirena's face had gone pale. Her hands were shaking now, though she tried to hide it by clasping them tighter. The prosecutor continued, "We have 12 more emails like this one, all showing that Mrs. Riven was not just aware of the clinic's operations, but actively participating in them. She wasn't a passive investor. She was a partner." The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, the judge had denied Mirena's bail request and ordered her held pending trial. The charges included conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. As the bailiffs led Mirena away in handcuffs, she turned and looked directly at Kairo. Her expression was cold, hateful. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Kairo met her gaze without flinching. "Yes, it is." Outside the courthouse, Kairo was surrounded by reporters. Microphones were shoved in his face. Cameras flashed. Questions came from every direction. "Mr. Riven, how do you feel about your stepmother's arrest? What message do you have for other families affected by the clinic? Are you planning to pursue civil lawsuits against the other people involved?" Kairo held up a hand, and the crowd quieted. He looked directly into the nearest camera. "This wasn't just about one person or one clinic," he said. "This was about a system that allowed vulnerable people to be exploited. A system that prioritized profit over human lives. My family was one of dozens affected by this network, and I'm going to make sure it never happens again." He paused, letting his words sink in. "To the other families out there who've been hurt by this, I want you to know that you're not alone. We're going to fight for justice together. And to the people who enabled this, who profited from it, who looked the other way, your time is up. We're coming for you. And we're not stopping until every single person involved is held accountable." The crowd erupted with more questions, but Kairo walked away. Darius fell into step beside him, shielding him from the press as they made their way to the car. "That was a good speech," Darius said. "It wasn't a speech," Kairo replied. "It was a promise." Back at the mansion, Dahlia was in the living room with the twins. They were sitting on the floor, building something with blocks. When Kairo entered, both boys looked up. "How did it go?" Dahlia asked. "She's being held without bail," Kairo said. "Trial starts in 6 weeks." Dahlia exhaled slowly. "Good." Zion stood and walked over to Kairo. He tugged on his sleeve. "Papa." Kairo knelt down. "Yeah. Is the bad lady going to jail?" Kairo nodded. "Yes, for a long time." "Good," Zion said. Then he hugged Kairo's leg and went back to his brother. Kairo stood and looked at Dahlia. She was smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. "They're starting to feel safe," she said quietly. "For the first time, they're starting to believe this is real." "It is real," Kairo said, "and it's going to stay that way." That night, after the boys were asleep, Kairo sat in his office going through the case files. There were still dozens of people connected to the network. Judges who'd signed falsified adoption orders. Lawyers who'd created fake paper trails. Doctors who'd performed procedures without consent. Marcus had assembled a team of attorneys who were filing lawsuits against every single one of them. Criminal charges where possible. Civil suits everywhere else. The goal wasn't just to win. It was to send a message. To make sure everyone in the system knew that this kind of corruption wouldn't be tolerated anymore. Kairo's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a lot of enemies today." Kairo stared at the message. Then he typed back, "Good. I'm just getting started." He set the phone down and went back to work. There were still battles to fight. Still people to hold accountable. But for the first time in 3 years, Kairo felt like he was winning. Not just for himself. For Dahlia. For the boys. For every family that had been torn apart by people who thought they were above the law. He was going to make sure they understood they weren't. The board meeting was packed with people who wanted to see Kairo fail. Every major investor. Every executive. Every person who'd ever had a stake in Kairo's empire. And sitting in the front row, looking smug and confident, were Mirena's remaining allies. The ones who hadn't been arrested yet. The ones who still thought they could save themselves by taking Kairo down. "Thank you all for coming," Kairo said, standing at the front of the room. "I know there have been questions about recent events. About my fitness to lead this company. About whether the Riven name can survive this scandal. So I'm here to answer those questions." One of the board members, a man named Gerald Hutchins who'd been Mirena's closest ally for years, stood up. "With all due respect, Mr. Riven, this company can't afford to be associated with your family drama. The publicity has been disastrous. Our stock price has dropped 12%. Clients are pulling contracts. This board needs to seriously consider whether you should step down." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Kairo nodded calmly. "I understand your concerns. And you're right, the publicity has been difficult. But let me be clear about something. This isn't family drama. This is a criminal conspiracy that was operating inside this company. Using company resources. Using company connections. And some of you knew about it." The room went silent. Kairo pulled up a slide. Bank records. Wire transfers. Emails. All of it connecting various board members and executives to the clinic. All of it showing how deep the corruption ran. "6 months ago, my children were taken from me," Kairo continued. "Not by strangers, by people I trusted. People who worked in this building. People who sat in this room. And they didn't do it alone. They had help. Financial help. Legal help. Administrative help." He looked directly at Gerald Hutchins. "Mr. Hutchins, you authorized a company transfer of $50,000 to a legal firm that was creating falsified adoption documents. Care to explain why?" Hutchins's face went red. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Really?" Kairo pulled up another slide. "Because here's your signature on the authorization form. And here's an email from you to Mirena Riven confirming the transfer. And here's a recorded phone conversation where you discuss covering up the paper trail." The room erupted. Board members were talking over each other. Some were trying to leave. But Darius and his security team were blocking the doors. "No one's leaving," Kairo said calmly. "Not until we're done here." He continued for the next hour, methodically presenting evidence against every person in the room who'd been involved. Some had known exactly what they were doing. Others had looked the other way. But all of them had enabled the network to operate. By the end of the meeting, 7 board members had resigned. 3 more had agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. And the rest were staring at Kairo with a mix of fear and respect. "This company is going to survive," Kairo said. "But it's going to do it the right way. With transparency. With accountability. With ethics. And anyone who can't commit to that can leave now." No one moved. "Good," Kairo said. "Then let's get to work." He walked out of the room and found Dahlia waiting in the hallway. She was holding Elijah's hand. Zion was standing beside her, clutching a stuffed bear Kairo had given him. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's done," Kairo said. Elijah tugged on his mother's hand. "Can we go home now?" Dahlia smiled. "Yeah, baby, we can go home." They walked out together, past the reporters who were still camped outside, past the photographers who were shouting questions. Kairo didn't stop to answer them. He just kept walking, his family beside him. When they got to the car, Zion climbed into Kairo's lap instead of the back seat. "Papa." "Yeah. Are the bad people all gone now?" Kairo hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise that everything was fixed, that the world was safe now. But he couldn't lie to his son. "Most of them are," Kairo said. "And we're working on the rest." Zion nodded, accepting this answer. Then he leaned his head against Kairo's chest and closed his eyes. Kairo held him, feeling the weight of his small body, the trust in the way he relaxed against him. This was what mattered. Not the board meetings, not the trials, not the reporters. This, his family, safe and together. The drive home was quiet. Elijah fell asleep in Dahlia's arms. Zion was still curled against Kairo's chest. Dahlia was looking out the window, her expression distant. "What are you thinking about?" Kairo asked. "Everything," she said. "How close we came to losing all of this. How many families didn't get this ending?" Kairo reached over and took her hand. "That's why we're going to keep fighting. For them." Dahlia squeezed his hand. "I know. And I'm with you. Whatever it takes." Back at the mansion, they put the boys to bed and then sat together in the living room. Kairo poured them both a glass of wine, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. "I've been thinking," Dahlia said, "about what I want to do, now that I'm me again." "What do you mean?" "I want to rebuild the nonprofit, the adoption advocacy work I was doing before, but bigger this time, better. I want to help families navigate the system. Make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else." Kairo looked at her. "Are you sure? After everything you've been through?" "Because of everything I've been through," Dahlia corrected. "I know what it's like to be trapped, to have no voice, to have people making decisions about your life without your consent. And I want to make sure other people have someone fighting for them." Kairo nodded slowly. "Then I'll help. Whatever you need. Funding, legal support, connections. It's yours." Dahlia smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They sat there together, planning the future. Planning how they'd use everything they'd learned, everything they'd survived, to make things better. It wouldn't be easy. It would take years, maybe decades. But they had time. And they had each other. That was enough. 3 months later, Dahlia stood in front of a crowd of reporters at the opening of the new advocacy center. It was housed in a renovated building downtown, 3 floors of office space dedicated to helping families navigate adoption, foster care, and family court. There were lawyers on staff, social workers, therapists, everything a family might need to protect themselves from predatory systems. "This center exists because of the families who didn't get justice," Dahlia said into the microphone. "The families who were torn apart by people who exploited the gaps in our legal system. We can't change what happened to them, but we can make sure it doesn't keep happening." The crowd applauded. Kairo stood off to the side, holding Zion and Elijah's hands. The boys were dressed in matching button-up shirts, looking more confident than they had 3 months ago. They were talking more now, laughing more, starting to act like the kids they should have been all along. After the ceremony, families started arriving for the center's first day of operations. A young couple with a newborn, trying to navigate an adoption that had stalled in the courts. A grandmother fighting for custody of her grandchildren. A single father who'd been falsely accused of neglect. Dahlia met with each of them personally, listening to their stories, offering resources, making connections. Kairo watched her work, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Pride, not in himself, in her, in what she'd survived, in what she'd built from the ashes of her trauma. "Papa," Zion said, tugging on his hand. "Can we go play now?" Kairo looked down at his sons. "Yeah, let's go." They went outside to the small playground that had been built behind the center. It was Kairo's idea. He wanted this place to feel welcoming to children, safe, fun. While the boys played, Kairo sat on a bench and checked his phone. There was a message from Marcus. Final verdict came in. Mirena got 22 years. No possibility of parole for at least 15. Kairo stared at the message. He should have felt satisfaction, victory, but all he felt was tired. Justice had been served, but it hadn't erased the damage. It hadn't given back the 3 years Dahlia had lost. It hadn't undone the trauma the boys had experienced. All it had done was ensure it wouldn't happen again. At least not by the same people. "Papa, watch," Elijah called from the top of the slide. Kairo looked up and smiled. "I'm watching." Elijah slid down, laughing the whole way. Zion was right behind him. Dahlia came outside and sat beside Kairo on the bench. Good first day. Very good, she said. We helped 4 families already. Got 2 cases reopened that had been dismissed. Connected 3 others with legal representation. That's amazing. It's a start, Dahlia said. There's so much more to do, but it's a start. They sat together watching their sons play. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was peaceful, quiet, normal. Normal had never felt so precious. Mama, Zion called. Come push us on the swings. Dahlia stood and walked over to them. Kairo followed. They spent the next hour playing with the boys, pushing them on swings, catching them at the bottom of slides, lifting them onto the monkey bars. It was such a simple thing, playing at a playground. But after everything they'd been through, it felt like a miracle. When it started getting dark, they packed up and headed home. The boys fell asleep in the car, exhausted from playing. Kairo carried them inside and up to their bedroom, tucking them both in. Zion stirred as Kairo pulled the blanket over him. Papa. Yeah. Are you gonna be here when I wake up? Kairo's throat tightened. I'm going to be here every single day. I promise. Forever. Forever. Zion smiled and closed his eyes. Kairo stood there for a moment, watching his sons sleep. Then he left the room quietly and found Dahlia in the kitchen making tea. They asleep? She asked. Out cold. Dahlia handed him a cup. I've been thinking about what Zion asked you today. About forever. What about it? I want that, she said. Not just for them. For us. I want to make it official. Get married. Build a real family. Not just recover from what was taken from us, but create something new. Kairo set his cup down and pulled her into his arms. I've been waiting 3 years to hear you say that. Then let's do it, Dahlia said. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Nothing fancy. Whatever you want, Kairo said. As long as we're together. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, planning a future that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. There were still hard days ahead. Therapy sessions for the boys. Ongoing legal battles. The constant work of running the advocacy center. But they had each other. And they had hope. That was more than enough. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the systems that fail the people who need them most, then share it. Leave a comment and tell us what you think. Tell us about your own experiences with advocacy, with fighting for what's right, with protecting the people you love. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because there are more stories coming. Stories about families fighting back. Stories about people refusing to give up. Stories that remind us why we keep going even when things seem impossible. Don't miss the next one. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what moved you. Tell us what you do differently. Tell us how we can support each other. Because that's what this is really about. Supporting each other. Fighting for each other. Making sure no one has to face these battles alone. We're all in this together. And together, we're stronger than any system that tries to break us. See you in the next story.